Attorney Somm here. We've got another great show for you today. I'm going to be joined by the chairman of Feudi di San Gregorio, and we're going to be conducting a virtual tasting, including of this incredible Serpico, which is made from pre-Phylloxera Aglianico vines from Campania. Hello.
Hi, how are you, John? Good?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks so much.
No, thank you for inviting me. I'm very excited to talk about my region tonight.
Absolutely. I'm certainly excited as well. And so everyone, this is Antonio Capaldo. He is the chairman of Feudi di San Gregorio in the Campanian region of Italy, and certainly one of the most prominent producers and one who's done much to update the image and the visibility of wines from the region over the years. And so we're very much looking forward to speaking with you today.
Thank you very much.
Could you start out just by talking a little bit about your background, your personal background?
Yes, I will do. I mean, first of all, I'm very happy we're having this call now because I'm still relaxed. Harvest is still a month to go, so we still have some time to prepare. This is the most, I would say, the most intriguing time of the year. And my background, this is why I'm saying that, my background is not in wine. I grew up in a family that owned a winery, so in a way, I grew up drinking and knowing everything about wine since I was young, but I did not work into the wine business until I was 32, so 2009, so over 10 years ago. And before I was working mostly in finance, in consulting. I always say I was on the dark side of the world. And then suddenly, not suddenly, but it was a moment in the family life where we took a decision, and I decided to join the family business because it's a wonderful, I was very lucky to have this opportunity to choose, first of all. So it was a wonderful realm and sector to work. It's a living thing, so it's something that really grows in you, and so it took some time. Similarly to a vine and similarly to the fruit, it takes time to grow in you. But when I was 32, it was time to come back, and I did not bring much of my previous background, most bad advice that I gave to other companies for money before. Now I'm trying to do my best for our winery. That's basically my background, mostly economic, not particularly winemaking, but I became sommelier when I was 26. So drinking, I always did this a lot, in particular wines of all around the world, which I'm sure you agree is the basis of our culture. Experiment, trying, testing new things.
I completely agree. And I share your background a little bit, except I've been more on the legal side. And so
yeah, that's what I heard. You were on the dark side as well. So.
Exactly, yeah. And so I'm still there to some extent, but I'm also getting involved in wine as well. So it's definitely a fun place to be. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how the company was started and when it was first established.
Yes, it was my family, my uncle and my dad. They founded the company in 1986. So there was an earthquake in 1980 in the area that devastated the area. It was a very serious earthquake, and my family decided to invest back. My dad was working in finance as well in Rome. My uncle as well was working in Rome. So we decided to invest back in their homeland. They decided to invest back in their homeland in something that was that the area was vocated for. So the vines, and in particular winemaking was not that important at the time, but everyone was producing some wine or producing some grapes. When we started in '86, we were number 6. The 6th bottler in the area. Now there are over 150. So even if the area was vocated for the grape production, the producer used mostly to sell the grapes rather than producing their own wine. And I have to say that in the 90s and in the 2000s, the whole area grew a lot. And we are the largest, but I think the movement, there is a growing trend in quality, in style, in awareness, in self-awareness of the potential of the area. So it started in '86, and I have to say we were successful in the '90s. So we were a combination of this idea of a pioneeristic of the indigenous, rediscovering the indigenous varietals. There was a good design also in the labels that always helped. So a good and fresh approach to brand that was very contemporary. So there was a combination of luck and I would say also positive choices and quality choices that made us quite successful quite rapidly. 20 years from the foundation, we are already quite significant as a winery.
Yeah, and certainly I understand that there was another big step up when you had a new facility constructed around 2004 or so.
Yes, there was this between 2001 and 2004. There was a major step for us because we did the new winery, which is a wonderful place, and of course I welcome everyone to come and visit. I hope that traveling will become easier and easier, and it's an open winery. The idea behind this new winery that is a massive architectural piece, but it's also a living place where people can really experience several ways of wine tasting. They can see the people working because it's not like a museum. It's a place where we make wine, but people can literally walk around everywhere. And it has been important for us in terms of course, opening to visitors, but also, and we have a Michelin star restaurant in the first floor, so the whole hospitality concept, but it was also a moment where we decided we were adult as a winery, we decided, okay, let's go one step ahead. And also in the style of the wine, these years has been important in terms of the capability, not just to improve the quality, but to be more clear and more straight in what we believe we can do in terms of wine. We left a little bit of the barrique schizophrenia that was a bit too much at the end of the 90s. We went back to larger oaks. So it was a period of maturity. And in 2001, we also introduced our small labels that were particularly important for our success. So this is, and I think most importantly, we endorsed, we endorsed a philosophy of the connection between wine and art, wine and design, which is critical for our life every day. We believe it's not because it's not a sign of pretension, it's a sign of attention. We try to think that what we do is similar to what an artist does. Now, of course, he does unique pieces. For us, it's a bit different, but we work in doing something based on our heritage, for the consumer of today, but also for the consumer of tomorrow. So this traveling time is pretty similar to what an artist does, and I think this is something that help us to really to work with a fresh mind, because we need to be open to what is happening today, but we also have to think of what is going to happen tomorrow. And of course, we have to be aware of our legacy of these indigenous varietals that come from the Roman and the Greek, of this area where viticulture always existed, but it doesn't need to be a burden. It needs to be something living, which is what we try to do every day.
No, I completely agree. That's very well said. I think a lot of times people certainly think the most important part is of course what's inside the bottle, but definitely I think everyone will agree that when you have an overall experience, it can be even more elevated when you have attention to the labels and the artwork in the entire experience. It really enriches the entire thing. And so I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, there are people that say that actually the outfit doesn't matter, and actually it takes out attention to what's inside. I think that honestly, putting a lot of attention also on the label design, the quality of the glass, which is important, the bottle quality, etc. It shows that you care about every step in the process. And sometimes, the wine can be very good, but then you have cork problems. We all know how crazy it is when you wait for a bottle to be opened and then it's corked, or it has another default, or it breaks down the glass, the bottle. So I think that, even if the label is ruined, or something can be wasted in the whole experience. So it's important because people know that inside the winery, this is always important, that when we do a choice, it's also for the people working inside the winery. They know that we try to pay a lot of attention to everything.
And you mentioned visitation opportunities. As long as we're on that subject, could you talk a little bit about what people could expect if they visit the property?
Yeah, we have several visits, and then we like visit formulas, let's say, or possibilities, but we like to tailor, if people write us, that we like to tailor the visit depending on what a visitor expects. But I think there are two basic things that, one is of course visiting the winery, and the winery is a wonderful, as I said, it's a very contemporary architectural piece, because when we created that, we did not pretend we had like 20 generations in wine, which we don't. So it's very contemporary in terms of architecture. But inside there are spaces that are very, very traditional, that all this space where the oak is. So you expect to see where the wines is created, but it's not just a sentence, you really are going to experience it. And you're going to see there are also some artistic pieces, because we have a small art collection for benefit purpose that we're putting together. So we expect people to have a journey between wine, culture, art, and also, of course, Mediterranean cuisine. But there is a second part of the visit that, depending on how much time people have, can be very important or very small. It's visit to the vineyards. And the vineyards for me is the most important part. Our area, we have been successful. Actually, we've been successful because we grow vines in a wonderful area. And actually, we are still not at the level of our terroir. I believe that our terroir deserves even better wines than what we're able to do today. So visiting the vineyards, it's something that for me, it's always everywhere. It's the most important part. In particular, what I mean is that our area is very fragmented. There are many, many, many small parcels. We never experienced intense viticulture. So consider that Feudi, we own 350 hectares divided into 600 parcels. And each of these parcels is vinified separately. And when you visit those, you see there is a small vineyard, and then you see olive trees, and then you see vegetables, and then you see the woods. So it's living a little bit of an experience of an area that is not particular, that there's a very strong approach to biodiversity, has not been impacted by intense viticulture like you can see in other areas that have been more successful. The reason is, at the end of the day, is that because we have never been enormously successful. So we could protect our terroir and our tradition from an intense approach. And last thing I want to say, if you go to Taurasi, which is one of the wines we're tasting together, there are vines that are over 200 years old, and this is a spectacular part of our visit. If you have more time, you can literally walk under these trees because they are more than 3 meters tall, and you can actually see something that honestly I haven't seen anywhere else in the world. So this Prefilostera pergola, where you can walk under the vines and see the grapes over you growing. So a lot of beautiful things, to say it short. Yes, it's in particular in that vineyard, which is the Serpico vineyard that you mentioned at the beginning. It's incredible because you don't have one of two Prefilostera plants; you have over 500. So when you're in the middle of it, you are really you don't see the end of it. So it's quite spectacular, to have vines everywhere, over you, close to you, with very big. Big, almost trees are these vines. One of those, it's the biggest one. It's not only 3 meters tall; it's 7 meters wide. That you say, wide in terms of the branches. So and you see in Europe you find Prefilostera vines in Georgia. Which is in the eastern part of Europe. You can find Prefilostera vines, some of them in Etna, some of them in the north of Italy, few of them in Spain, in Priorat. But it's rare to find a full vineyard like that one. But honestly, I mean, it's not because ours is more beautiful. I mean, Prefilostera vines in general are incredible because they not only have a story, they not only are old, but they are the possibility to use these indigenous clones when you plant a new vineyard. It's incredible because you can fuel biodiversity rather than unify. When you plant a new vineyard, you don't use one clone, but for instance, the Serpico vineyard is over 30 clones, pretty different. So you use them when you plant a new vineyard, and it increases your biodiversity potential.
Could you please talk a little bit more about Perpignan area and some of the topography and the growing conditions that you have there?
Yes, it's first of all, we are in Campania, so 150, 160 miles south from Rome, not by the coast where you have Naples. So imagine 30 miles east from Naples, in the center of Campania, there is an area called Irpinia. The name of the province is Avellino. Irpinia, first of all, the name Irpinia comes from the Latin word irps, which means wolf. It's an area of forest. It's an area of hills and mountains. The average altitude of our vineyards is over 500 meters, 550. So we are not talking about wines that are generated by the coast. And unfortunately, when you go in Naples and it's sunny, often it's rainy. So our area has over 150 days of rain because it's enclosed by these hills and mountains, and the humidity stays there, which is bad for living because sometimes it rains for 30 days in a row. But it's very good for wine, in particular because the seasons where the rains falls are the right ones for for growing, for the cycle of growth of the plant. Now, rain is one thing. The second thing that is typical is altitude, as I said. The third, we had the snow 6 times last year, so it's not the southern climate you would expect, and that's why you have this freshness and acidity in the wines. The third component that is, I think it's outstanding, is the soils. Everyone is looking for soils now, and everyone is looking for volcanic soils. Now, volcanic soils are bringing sapidity, character after finish. These are all things that you're looking into wine today. The interesting thing is that most of our soils are of volcanic origin, but some of them are mineral without being volcanic. For instance, on Greco, which is the second one we're tasting, most of the minerality doesn't come from the volcanic soils. So soils are not generated by volcanic ashes, like in the Taurasi area, for instance, but there are mines, mineral mines under the level of the soil, in particular sulfurous mines and potassium mines. So the level of minerals is very high, but it doesn't come from the presence of volcanic soils, but it comes from stones in the soil, which is great because it's another sign of how different conditions, how big the variety is in our area, how different things you can actually find. So soils, rain, altitude, and the last, which is probably the most important, is that in Irpinia there are 3 varietals. Indigenous varietals, they've been there forever, over 2 millennials. These 3 varietals, they've been in the blood and the soul of our farmers. Because when it's interesting, if you see the map of the DOCG, there are 3 DOCGs. It's the only area of Italy with 3 DOCGs, which is the highest appellation. It's like the AOC in French, the DOP in all Europe. So it's the highest appellation. You have 3 DOCGs in Irpinia, both white and red, and associated to 3 different varietals. That's unique. And the varietals, they never overlap. So the farmers used to plant Fiano in one area, Greco in one area, and Aglianico in another area, and they knew this was right, not because of the law, because the DOCG was given in the 2002 for the red and 93, for the whites and 93 for the red. The viticulture already knew that in a specific terroir was good for Fiano, a specific terroir was good for Greco, and another specific terroir was good for Aglianico. And given that we are, all the areas are very one close to the other, it's incredible to have such a diversity again. So indigenous varietals that have been there forever. On the whites, you have Greco and Fiano. Greco comes from the Greek, Fiano comes from the Latin origin. Greco di Tufo literally means Greco generated from Tufo town, which is the center of the DOCG appellation. And then on the red side you have Aglianico, which is again comes from the Greek word Hellenike, which means Greece. So again Greek origin. And the Taurasi is the name of the town in the center of the appellation. We will get back to that when we taste the wines. But the last thing I want to say is that nearby Irpinia, literally nearby, there is another region called Sannio, which is the province of Benevento, pretty similar conditions, but dominated by one white varietal that is Falanghina. Falanghina is more aromatic. It's a little bit less diversified, the soils of this area, but this is where you find the Falanghina, which is another wine we're tasting tonight. And this is another indigenous varietal with a wonderful story, because Falanga is the name of the stick in ancient times, the vines were growing on the trees in a pergola because the farmer could grow vegetables on the ground. And so it was a way of maximizing productivity, let's say. And the falanga was the name of the stick in Latin used to squeeze the vines and make the grape fall, similarly to what you do with olive trees today. And Falanghina basically is the name of the grape, and it shows the fact that it was one of the most popular grapes back in the Roman time, over 2 millennia ago. But we don't live only of history, so let's go back to to today's story.
And so it's a bit unusual then, as you mentioned. Certainly the region is known for these indigenous varietals, and you haven't had the proliferation of the international varietals like you have in some other areas. So certainly I think that a lot of the people that read my page, I know I've been hearing that they're more interested in indigenous varietals lately and more and what they describe as authentic experiences. So certainly very, very intriguing wines and indigenous grapes that are very interesting and should be tried if you haven't tried them yet.
Yeah, and the people sometimes they say we have been brave. I mean, my dad and my uncle have been brave to target on indigenous varietals. Actually, you don't have a choice in our area. That's the beauty of it. It's only indigenous varietals. You don't, even the international varietals are not even allowed. So by the regulation, so it has been protected in that realm, and it's great because today I see increasingly an attention to it. And Italy in general, you know how many indigenous varietals there are in Italy. So it's an incredible, opportunity. It's sometimes a little bit confusing. That's why your role is important. That there are so many different varietals, so many different appellations, and it's not easy for the consumer. But at the same time, behind each appellation, there is a real story. So you don't need to know them all by heart, in particular, not even myself. But whenever you approach one, you find out that there is a lot of things to know and a lot of things to discover.
Yes, and spoken a lot about the terroir. I think we have a pretty good sense for that now. Maybe you could shift gears a little bit and talk about your winemaking approach.
Yes, this is pretty connected, no? And I have to say, it's people that tell you that they've been linear, regular in their winemaking approach, sometimes they may lie to you. And I'm honest on that. We have been changing our approach a bit, not because of what we believe the consumer is expecting, to be honest, but mostly because we grow our own experience, no? And we feel a little bit more confident. But let's say that the most important thing is that you need to be very careful about the viticulture. The viticulture is the basis of it, and not because we want to talk. Of course, you need good grape to make a good wine, but also because it's very easy in my area to have bad grape. And I explain you why. We harvest. That's the thing I didn't mention at the beginning. Because of these climate conditions, we harvest very late. We begin to harvest the whites in October, and we finish Aglianico sometimes mid-November. So it's very challenging to get the right maturation of the fruit when maybe it starts even freezing in the night, or it rains, and you wanna harvest before losing everything. So the biggest challenge in the last 15 years for us has been to harvest at the right time. It's a pretty stupid thing, but if you ask me what's a winemaking approach, it has been to invest a lot of money in getting the right maturation moment, which is of course technology, but most importantly is having the capability to harvest 10 vineyards together if needed, and one vineyard divided into 7 different days if needed. So that's just having more people on the ground, having many different crushes, many different stainless steel containers or concrete containers. So everything you need, it's ready for diversifying each parcel and harvesting at the right time. Immediately after harvesting, in particular for Greco and Aglianico, they have much softer skin. You need immediately to transform. So you don't need to wait time. So you need to have the capability to work in parallel. Several, 3 varietals, maybe 4, sometimes with the Falanghina that is a little bit before, but sometimes overlaps. Several vineyards and separate them. So our winemaking approach has been to, working in the vineyards with the maximum qualitative approach. The yields are already quite low in our area, but if needed, we emphasize that in order to have the right, the best quality, and then being able to treat the fruit perfectly at the harvest time. Now, when it comes to aging, I already said something before. We had the period until I would say 2000, 2002, where we really used too much probably oak in our Aglianicos. Now we are more into the large oak rather than barrique, which is the tradition of some of the, actually of Italy. Even in Piedmont, nobody was using barrique in the 19th century. So we are, I think it's something that is happening in all Italy, and even in France. We are a little bit reducing barriques, we're increasing large oak. We believe that the drinkability that is natural of our white wines and red wines, because of this freshness and this minerality that gives you the structure, we don't need to do much. We don't need to show our muscles. That's why we don't do white wines that go into oak at all. So our winemaking approach is pretty simple, straightforward, and 90% of the effort is around the fruit.
Well, certainly, I think you mentioned earlier there were 600 different parcels, and just trying to organize the harvest for 600 different parcels in a short period of time, I could see would be a pretty big logistical challenge.
Yeah, but I'm very lucky because I have a chief of production, an agronomist who is probably one of the top agronomists in the world. He consulted everywhere. His name is Pierpaolo Sirch, Sirch, and he founded the pruning school over 30 years ago. And then he started working with us full-time in 2009. And with him, we have been able to really work also in terms of having, the database, the software, everything we needed in order to keep track of all these parcels. But most importantly, he has a very specific approach in the way of treating the plant, because is a specific method that actually doesn't go towards, to say it very simply, we have a very specific wine pruning and in general viticultural practices approach that in a nutshell is, okay, we don't care about how much you're going to produce today or tomorrow. We care about how long the life of the plant is going to be. And there is nothing advanced about that. It copies actually what the farmers used to do, because the farmers, they were smart and very much smarter than what an organized company can be. They said, okay, I want to have what is more important for me is to have a little bit more production this year, a little bit more next year, and then the plant doesn't survive, or to have a plant that survives for a long time. So in the way he cuts it's interesting because if you go, he has a website called Preparatori d'Uva. It's interesting because if you go there, you see in the way you cut for pruning, you respect the wood of the plant and you don't go towards maximizing productivity. So that's basically what we teach also to all our farmers. Sometimes they know because they've been doing that without giving it a name, because that's very common sense. And then the second thing that is important to handle of this is to have a database and having all the analysis online all the time and control everything, because the parcels are a little bit everywhere. But at the end of the day, I have to be honest with you, 80% is about having the right people, men that go around and taste, and still every time I ask him, are we ready, are we not, it tastes. At the end of the day, that's the moment where you know if it's ready for harvest or not.
And so that pruning method, is that a way that helps to prevent some of these trunk diseases that are becoming more common?
We don't have much, to be honest, with this, because the problem, Greco is a bit more delicate, and in Greco area we have over sometimes 180 days of rain, so it's a bit more challenging. We have more the issue of having attack from parasites that come from other cultivation, because the vines is not vine after vine after vine, as I said, it's fragmented, but it's parcels that are around other things like hazelnut trees, so it's a little bit the confusion of parasites. It's a bit more the challenge that we face, but the specific sickness that usually you face, for instance, we have a property in Bolgheri, in Tuscany. We face this in Tuscany much more, because where you have more intense viticulture in general, then it's more risky from that point of view.
Okay, perfect.
We never go above 4,000 plants per hectare. Everywhere, okay. In Greco in China, so I answer that.
Okay, so it's either 4,000 or less.
Yeah, 4,000 or less. Less depends. 4,000 for us, it's optimal. Less depends on the inclination. So sometimes it doesn't make sense because the water, the challenge is the water, because we are in an area that is full of light and full of water. So you need to have an approach to, if you have 1 hectare, you need to know where the water stays in particular in the spring, and it stays too much, because this is an area where the plant is not going to grow as it needs to. So at the end of the day, we never plant 1 hectare 100%. Out of an hectare, we plant between 60, 70%. And it's not because you leave the place to go around with the tractor. No? It's because there is always an area, because of our morphology of our soils, there is always an area where it doesn't make sense. So when you ask me the density, it's a little bit complicated, because we don't have 20 hectares altogether to give a right answer.
Right, that makes sense. Yep. And what about irrigation then? Do you rely exclusively on the rain? It's forbidden.
It's forbidden to irrigate, and in Irpinia, in our DOCGs, it's forbidden to irrigate. It's forbidden to irrigate in many DOCGs in Italy, which is actually, the approach was, let's not exaggerate on quantity, rather than, let's keep the vines where they should be. Now it's not the case anymore in every place of Italy, but in our area, it's except for the first 3 or 4 years, when you need to support the birth and the first growing, it's you cannot give it any water.
Well, should we move forward and start with the tasting?
We can. I'm here ready with we start with the Falanghina, right?